千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we delve deeply into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. So without further ado, let's get right back into Tao Te Ching chapter 50, and I would like to explain why it is so significant. As those who have been listening for years now, it often seems remarkable, serendipitous, that what we talk about in our time together on Sundays happens to reflect or mirror life in interesting, sometimes a little strange, remarkable ways. So Tao Te Ching chapter 50 is the chapter known as the life and death chapter. So this chapter is all about the Tao of life and death. So there's a lot of significance. There's a lot of remarkable reflection on what everyone is going through, the whole world. And this is applicable pretty much anytime. And it's a fitting end as the last chapter, the last note for this year, 2020. So let's get right into it. I want to, as usual, start out with a quick recap on what we talked about before, and then get to the second half of chapter 50. I think everyone would agree with me when I say that this has been an extraordinary year, to say the least. Now, for me personally, it's also a year of transformation, a year of change and growth. I think back on the person that I was at the beginning of this year and the person that I am right now, and I definitely see changes. I hope the same is for you as well, and I hope the change for you has been on the path of the Tao. This is when you say, I am the same person, yet I'm not. So the Tao is all about that. Here in chapter 50, what we did last time was that we started out as usual with the sectional analysis, where we divided up the chapter into sections. In this particular case, we were able to identify two main sections, the beginning and the end, the first half and the second half, where in the first half, there's categorization of humanity, of people, different kinds of people. And this is categorization from the perspective of the Tao, that is, the perspective of how people live, how people approach life, which in the Tao perspective is also how they approach death. Putting the two together, we can say that people approach life and death in different ways. Then Lao Tzu asks the question, why? Why is it that way? Why are they like that? And what I did last time was that I highlighted the two places where the questions are. So the first one, as you can see in line 6, why? Why is it that people are categorized in those ways? Here, in the placement of the question at line 6, this causes a lot of the interpretation of the Tao Te Ching to think that this question applies just to line 5. line 4 and line 5. Why is it that there are people whose lives are moved toward death, line 4, and then line 5, 3, and 10? Why is that? But when I show the whole thing like this, with a question for the first half and a question on the second half, I think you will also see the other natural interpretation, and that is the top question, why, applies to the entirety of the first half, and the bottom question, why, applies to the entirety of the second half. And I'll explain as we go. But now, just note the matching questions. I will also be talking about the different ways that one can interpret this chapter. I definitely have a preference. It brings everything into clarity. It helps make everything make a lot more sense. So I hope to demonstrate that for everyone today. At the end of our process, I think you will also have a very clear understanding of what this is all about. And it's a very important question. What can be more important than the question in regards to life and death? That is the one question that we're all here to explore together. Last time, we worked our way through this chapter line by line, and we were able to complete line 7. And then we started talking about line 8. So line 8 is what we're going to pick up once we're done with the recap. For now, though, I do want to talk about the categorization that Lao Tzu presented. And as you can see here, I've got multiple lines highlighted. They all say 3 in 10. So 3 categories of 3 in 10. Last category, 1 in 10, which is what the bottom half is devoted to. So let's summarize that in our little recap. That recap begins with line 1. In line 1, as you can see, it says coming into life, entering death. And what I expressed previously is that this is deceptively simple. It's actually very profound. It's actually the signal that this is all about the Tao of life and death. So I'm going to start my recap there. 出生入死 is the way it sounds in Chinese. Literally, it's the first character is coming, the second character is life or birth, third character is to enter or go into, and the final character is death. So coming into life, entering death. That's a pretty literal translation for that. Previously, I talked about coming into life is the transition from the spiritual realm or the Tao into the material world. Then the second half of it, to enter or go into death, is the reverse. To go from the material world, where this is where we all are, this is where we are interacting, this is where we're learning all the life lessons. When our time is done, we transition from here back to the spiritual realm or the Tao, and that is the return trip. That's actually important. That's actually the basis for everything that will follow. So I want to spend just a little bit more time on it. Make sure we all get clarity on the Tao of life and death. So what I'll do here is that I'm going to start with the Tao, and I'm using the yin and yang symbol as the representation for the Tao. So think of this as the abstract, undefined, unlimited, unbounded, infinite field of the Tao. The field that pervades everything, the field that is eternal, the thing, the Tao that you and I are all part of. Then there is the earth representing the material world. This is where we live out our physical existence. So when you see that expression coming into life, the first half of it is about making the transition from the Tao, represented by the yin and yang, to the world, to the material world, represented by the earth, as you can see here. Then the overall scheme is that when we're done here, we all make the return trip. And this is not the only trip that we make, this existence right here and now. So there are many before, many after. And of course, there's gonna be people who say, you're talking about reincarnation. Let's set that aside for the moment and just focus on the main idea of the Great Circle. So the other half, entering into death, is the return back to the Tao. So I think, everyone would find this entire scheme to be intuitively obvious, intuitively appealing. We know our physical bodies, the molecules of our physical selves, they come from, basically recycled molecules out of all the other material things that pre-existed in this material world. Our bodies. We oftentimes associate our physical selves as us. We identify with that strongly. But you know and I know that there was a time when our physical bodies did not exist, before we were born. There's gonna be a time, hopefully many years from now, when our physical bodies will no longer exist. That's just the way things are. So we also know that our physical bodies is just one aspect of our being. There is another aspect of it, and many people have different names, different labels for that. The spiritual side, the soul, I usually call it the true self. When I call it the true self, what I'm talking about is this bizarre concept, you. This you, well, you know what that is. You feel you. You feel the self. You know you doesn't change. This you-ness doesn't change. This true self does not change no matter how your body changes. It's not really your name, although we think of it that way sometimes. It's not your name because you can change your name to something else. You can change your name to something completely different than your name is today, but you're still gonna be you. So that part of it, you're still gonna be you, that's the you I'm talking about. That you never changes no matter what. Indeed, I extend beyond this lifetime to say that this you is the eternal you, the true self. It never changes. It has existed, has always existed, and will always exist, no matter what. There's more to it than that. So all great spiritual traditions speak of it. So I have a wealth of options to pick and choose different examples from different great spiritual traditions to make my point here about the spiritual self. Even if you don't subscribe to the soul, you would still have to admit that there is a you that doesn't change no matter what. At least in the context of our present existence, the existence as of this moment. And of course, you may subscribe to the idea that there's this ineffable soul that we possess, the spiritual entity, or you can also say, well, at the very least, I know that there's consciousness. I know that I have human consciousness. Good, you can hold on to that as well. To summarize everything that I have just talked about, so many different ways to express essentially the same thing, I'm going to bring in Huineng, the sixth patriarch of the Zen tradition. And the reason why I would bring in this great master, this great sage from the past, the Zen tradition, of course, was a fusion of Tao thought and Buddhist teachings. Huineng had a view into the spiritual realm that was clearer than most, before or after. He saw, as you and I do, that the physical body is subject to birth and death. It's transient. It will expire. It will decompose. So then, what Huineng talked about, the way he talked about it, when what we refer to as the soul, what I talk about as the true self, he referred to it as self-nature, that everybody has a self-nature. And when he became enlightened spiritually, Huineng exclaimed, he said, how unexpected is it that this self-nature is not born or extinguished, unlike the body. What he meant is that this spiritual self, this spiritual entity that I am, that you are, that everybody is not subject to birth and death like the physical body, because it is an eternal essence. It has always existed. It will always exist. Once upon a time, before humanity existed, it was part of this undifferentiated universal essence. Prior to the existence of the universe, it was simply the Tao. It existed in the non-existence of the Tao. Bottom line, this physical form that you and I experience, this material world experience right here and now, is actually just a small part of your eternal voyage. Okay, so nobody has all the answers. Some pretend to have all the answers, but what we can glean, what we can glimpse, is that there are overall principles that always apply. Now, the question that I oftentimes get when I speak of the Great Circle, and the Great Circle, I'm talking about this circle right in the middle, one question comes up. So Derek, which sutra, which classic can I read that talks about this? I want to read it. I want to buy that. I want to go through the translation of that. Okay, that's in the next slide. The Tao of Life and Death. Which sutra or classic talks about this? To answer this question properly, I'm going to give an answer that I don't like, that I usually don't like. This is the answer. None of them, all of them. Why do I say that? It's because none of the classics or sutras speak to it explicitly. There's not going to be a translation that says, when you die, you go to the Tao. And in the world of the Tao, the roads are paved with gold. So in the classic sutras of the Tao, it doesn't say that. It won't get so specific. It's not going to tell you every meal is a banquet. All of your needs are taken care of. No, the sages will not talk about what they don't know. They will talk about the principles that they understand completely. So why is it that the sutras or classics don't talk about even the principles in an explicit way? Well, it's simple. The Tao that we're talking about right now It is meant to be contemplated. By whom? By the individual, by you, by me. It's meant to be meditated upon. It's meant to be grasped, understood, comprehended individually. It is not, it never was meant to be spoon-fed to us. It's something that we have to figure out on our own. This chapter, chapter 50, is a pointing to the path. It's pointing in the right direction. It's pointing to the general area of inquiry. The metaphor in spirituality is to compare the spiritual quest to digging for treasures. So, question for everyone. What if the spiritual insight was simply handed to you? Rather than digging for treasures, it's just given to you on a silver platter. What will happen? How would you feel? Well, you would probably not think of it as being of a particular value. It means more. Indeed, it means everything if you arrive upon the realization yourself. Or, in the language of the metaphor, if you dig for the treasure yourself and uncover the treasure to open up the treasure chest for yourself. So that's what it means when I say, can you dig it? You have to dig for the spiritual treasure with your own effort. All that I can really do is to point in the right direction. That is the appropriate role of all books and teachers, is to point to that and say, you can do some digging in this general area, or I can say, you can do your inquiry and self-reflection and contemplation in this general direction. Best of luck to you. May you come upon the insight that can be the most important insight in life. So let's do that. Let's do exactly that. Let's start digging in the general direction, keeping in mind that most of the effort is going to have to come from you. This is something that you're going to have to do for yourself. I can point the way. I cannot do the digging for you. So the way that I will point to it is by this particular slide here. I put this together because I think this makes it so clear. This makes it incredibly clear. Last time, we started talking about the followers of life. So 3 in 10, this is basically the first of the categories that we looked at last time. Basically, Lao Tzu said, among people in general, out of any 10 randomly selected, on the average, you're going to find 3 of what he called the followers of life. So now, let me point out, last time I said, followers of life. That sounds really good. Can I be a follower of life? You know, like a light worker? Can I be one of the good guys following life instead of death? But then what I said is that I want to ask everyone to consider the possibility, other than the usual interpretation, that this is a good thing. The possibility that is not actually a good thing, because a long, safe life can also be a boring life. So even the people who don't understand the deeper levels, they understand the followers of life means the people who have longevity. They live long, safe uneventful lives. I say that it can also be a boring life in the context that it's a life where you never actually fulfill your true potential. It's just a safe existence. Now, I have a lot more to say about that. I have a lot more to say to prove that it's actually not something that was supposed to be taken in a positive context. And yet, just gotta tell you, even when I study all the commentary from Chinese scholars, people who know the original language as well as I do, I see that even they don't get past the surface. They'll look at followers of life and they will assume that it's a good thing. Okay? Now, hang on to that thought. I will explain. Second category, the followers of death. Also 3 and 10, as you can see here. Now, previously I said that the followers of life and the followers of death are diametrically opposite, like yin and yang, to one another. So whatever we say about the followers of life, we have to take the mirror image of that for the follower of death. So when we say that followers of life live long, uneventful lives, we have to say the followers of death live short, risky lives. They take so many risks, and eventually one particular risk catches up to them, resulting in death, and therefore shortening the life. So people who live with a lot of risk are the followers of death, especially when it results in their untimely passing. So this, everyone would agree that this is not a positive thing. Everyone would look at the followers of death and say that, well, that can't be the Tao. They mistakenly sometimes think that followers of life are living in accordance with the Tao. I'm here to say that's actually not the case, and I will prove it. Now, for now, let's go to the third category, those whose lives are moved toward death. What is that? Also 3 out of 10, according to Lao Tzu. This is the people, this is the group that could have longevity, but they live lives of excess. They live lives of overindulgence, overconsumption. And it shortens their life, and therefore we say that they speed toward death. They live lives of excess. The line that says why, because they live lives of excess, usually people think, even Chinese scholars will look at that and say it applies to the third category. Overindulgence results in untimely demise. I do want to suggest to you that the idea of excess applies to categories 1 and 2, the first 2 categories. Okay, they're excessive. Why? Because the first category is excessive caution, and the second category is excessive risk. Then the fourth category, which is fewer in number than any other category. So all of the other categories will outnumber the last category 3 to 1. The last category, 1% out of 10, those who are good at cultivating life. And what I said previously was that this is not explicitly stated. There isn't a line from chapter 50 that says 1% out of 10. So why is that? Why is it not specifically stated? It doesn't say those who are good at cultivating life, 1 in 10. It's definitely implied. And it's very easy to see when you look at a chart like this. From 1 to 10, 3 in 10 followers of life, 3 in 10 followers of death, 3 in 10 those whose lives are moved toward death. It's obvious. Well, that's how the ancient sages felt. That, well, it should be obvious. there's no need to belabor the point. Remember, this comes from the Tao Te Ching, written at a time when text was carved on bamboo sheets, on bamboo scrolls, basically bamboo strips strung together. Writing medium was at a premium, was hard to come by, required effort to assemble, required resources. Whatever you express had to be concise and to the point. Therefore, you have to not talk about the things that are already obvious. And remember, the Tao Te Ching was written to be a summary of existing wisdom. It was supposed to be a concise summary of existing wisdom. Therefore, the ancient sages would naturally feel it is not necessary to belabor the obvious. So this is the point where we ended last time, the 4 categories, and we were about to get into the final category, the last category, the 4th category, and to talk about, describe the people who are good at cultivating life. So we covered this particular slide, and what I wanted to do was that I want to take one step back to start our discussion from line 8. And, in doing this, I'm reminded of audio players, for audiobooks. Some of them are designed to be very user-friendly and very thoughtful in that when you pause the audiobook, the next time you come back to it, it would actually automatically back up 10 seconds, 15 seconds or so to replay the last bits before you paused last time. So I want to be thoughtful in doing something similar for everyone. Every time we go back to the point where we left off before, I take a small step back to make sure that we have continuity. Previously, what I said was that everything that follows after line 8 is metaphoric language. It's all in metaphors. None of it is meant to be taken literally. All of it is meant to be expanded to describe life situations. So, the points that we covered last time, from this line on, line 8, Lao Tzu describes the final category, the last category, the 1 in 10. 1 person out of 10, we would agree that's relatively uncommon, not as common as the other 3 categories. But the point is, they exist. They're out there. There are a few people out there who have definitely mastered the art of living the Tao life. Those who are good at cultivating life is the way that Lao Tzu expresses it in line 8. So metaphors is what's coming up. These metaphors describe social situations that are connected to life, to human nature, the human condition. So they applied to the people who lived at the time of Lao Tzu. They also apply to the human beings that live today. That's you and me. That's all of us. So it's very appropriate for us to study that. So we got to this point last time. Now let's go right in to the metaphors, starting with the first one, which is on line 9. Line 9 says, traveling on the road, they do not encounter rhinos or tigers. So a couple of things here. They, who are they? Well, those who are good at cultivating life, the 1 person out of 10. Traveling on the road, what is that? Well, let's break down the first 2 characters in line 9. These 2 characters, the first one means land. And the second character means travel, to travel across the land. So it's similar to when we say, road trip. So traveling on the road in this context is actually just the journey of life. So line 9 says traveling on the road, translation, interpretation, traveling on the journey of life. They do not encounter rhinos or tigers. So the wild animals, what are they? Those are metaphoric language as well. So wild animals points to the danger that one could come across while traveling. Dangerous life situations, events, tasks, people, all the different sources of negativity and danger. You know and I know they're out there. We could come across them potentially at any time. So taken together, putting everything together, it's saying that this is, by the way, a very important point. This line says Tao cultivators on the journey of life, they make meaningful progress. We know that because it says traveling on the road, traveling across the land, they're making progress, they're getting from point A to point B, and yet they remain quite safe in doing so. They're not encountering wild animals. Let me explain the deeper significance, the deeper meaning of this line. If you just take a look at the last parts of the final bullets that I have in this slide, Tao cultivators are quite safe in traveling through life. If you think about it, that last part of it is just exactly the same as being the followers of life. Followers of life live, they enjoy longevity, they live long because they're quite safe. Makes sense. What's the difference? Why would Tao cultivators be a different category than the followers of life? Another way to ask the same question is, why do I say followers of life are actually not the final category? Those are 3 in 10. Tao cultivators, those who are good at cultivating life, is 1 in 10. Why are they not the same? It's because Tao cultivators make progress in the journey of life. They get to where they want to go. To get to where they want to go, metaphorically, is to say they attain an aspiration that they have, that they enjoy success in attaining a measure of spiritual accomplishment, for instance, or material achievement, as the case may be. Something that they want to do in life, they have accomplished. That's getting from point A to point B. That's what's lacking in the followers of life. The 1 person out of 10 is able to make progress while remaining safe, while 3 out of 10 are living the safe life, but not necessarily making a whole lot of progress. That's the difference. That's why I say categories 1, 2, and 3, those are not living the Tao life, including the first category, even though many Chinese interpreters of the Tao Te Ching think that followers of life is a positive thing as well, and that they are synonymous with Tao cultivators. No, sir, they are definitely not. This line actually proves it. Okay, let's continue on. Let's take a look at line 10. Entering into an army, they are not harmed by weapons. Now, the vivid mental imagery from the previous line, traveling through the journey of life, traveling across the landscape of existence, there are dangers, and yet Tao cultivators who have mastered the art of living are safe, right? That's the vivid imagery of line 9. In line 10, it's a different imagery. Entering into an army, there is a whole bunch of other soldiers, other recruits, other military recruits in the army with you. This is a different imagery because this is now a group situation where you're going into a setting, encountering a whole bunch of other people who are supposed to be on your side. And yet, there's always rivalry. There's always, quote unquote, friendly competition. So that internal rivalry and competition within the army, that's what we're talking about here. This is also metaphoric. Going into the military means entering into the battlefield of social competition. In the battlefield of social competition, you have a lot of frenemies. You have a lot of colleagues who are also competitors. So I think you see the skillful way of utilizing different imagery, different metaphors to describe different perspectives, different angles on life. The other one was about the life journey. This one is about social interactions. What happens in social interactions? Well, it's the rat race. It's everybody frantically climbing the social ladder. So in that kind of social competition, it can turn negative. It can turn malicious. The Tao cultivator, those who have mastered the art of living, are okay when they are in this particular setting that can be very competitive, can be harmful. Tao cultivators are protected against the weapons of personal attackers, personal attacks wielded by other people. So the other soldiers are those who would attack you, who would launch personal attacks against you in that race to the top, in the rat race, in social competition. So I'm talking about meddlers, naysayers, those who try to sabotage you with false accusations, and so on. You've seen them, you've encountered them. You know exactly what Lao Tzu is talking about. So then, what does all this mean? Well, Lao Tzu is being much, much more specific. He's giving specific answers on continuing with the metaphoric language, continuing with the mental imagery. So we'll start with just rhinos. Rhinos have nowhere to thrust their horns. So this is getting much, much more specific in the first part, the life journey aspect of it. So when we say rhinos have nowhere to thrust their horns, another way to express the same thing is that Tao cultivators are shielded from danger due to the way they live, and this gets pretty specific. Horns, in this context, represent the damaging sharpness of criticism. When people are pointed, making pointed remarks at you, making sharp remarks about you, that's an attack. That's a danger, like the sharp horns of the rhino. How are Tao cultivators protected against that? Well, if you cultivate, practice, follow the Tao, then you know the importance of being consistent in your words and actions. I would actually even amplify that by saying that you want to be consistent in your thoughts, in your words, and in your actions. Thoughts, words, deeds are all consistent with one another. And this is the perfect protection against the criticism of hypocrisy. You do as you say as you think. If you are consistent all around to everyone, no matter who they are, then no one can say that you are hypocritical. So that's just one example. When you are consistent in that way, criticisms will have no basis in reality. They will cause no damage, even when someone tries to express it. Therefore, we can say that the horn has no place to thrust. So this is just one example out of many. You can think of many other situations in life where practicing the Tao, following the Tao, gives you natural protection against negativity from other people. That is the general idea. Line 12, tigers have nowhere to clasp their claws. So tigers in this case represent vicious people. Just like the rhinos with the sharp horns or criticism, tigers with their sharp claws also represent vicious people in life. They can cause damage. So for instance, as one example, by spreading malicious rumors, they can cause damage in other ways. But I want to stick to this example for now. So malicious rumors. Tao cultivators protect themselves against malicious rumors because they aspire to live with impeccable integrity. It's a protection against the tigers. Why? Because false rumors that someone tries to spread about you, maybe sometimes even outright accusations, as you see here, they're not taken seriously. The reason is because people know you. People know who you are, how you are. If you have always lived in a consistent way with integrity, when someone accuses you of not being that way, people are like, oh, well, I know you're joking. I know you are not serious. I know you can't possibly mean this person that I've known for years. When that is the case, tigers have nowhere to cause damage with their claws. So this would be another example of a similar situation. This is why we say, traveling through life, you as a Tao cultivator will not be subjected to danger. And finally, the third example there, this is in line 13, soldiers have nowhere to lodge their blades. Now we talked about just a moment ago that entering into the military camp, entering into the army, that's metaphoric description for the social landscape where a lot of competition goes on, some of it friendly, quite a bit of it not so friendly. Soldiers are the combatants in the arena of social competition. This includes most people in society. This includes everybody pretty much in our discussion, in our meeting today. Now, because we follow the Tao, Tao cultivators follow the Tao, one of the principles being that you can always do less to accomplish more. You can always focus on the process instead of the end results. And these principles, these ideas, all have the effect of helping you attain excellence while exerting minimal effort. Sometimes people think that you make it look so easy, that it seems to come so easily for you, and yet you are able to accomplish extraordinary results. So Tao cultivators have no problems in the competitive arena, no problems in competition. But this is also why Tao cultivators feel no need to be aggressively competitive. The excellence of the Tao cultivator is natural, it's unforced. That is why Tao cultivators do not have to engage in aggressive competition. What's the point? Why even bother? They don't need to prove anything to other people. They essentially compete against themselves. They want to better themselves all the time. They don't need to pick someone else to be some sort of hated rival to compete against, to outdo, to practice one-upmanship. Like, oh, you've done that well, I'm doing this. How you like me now? That type of thing. So this means there are no opportunities for others to cut them down to size, with the blades of one-upmanship. So you can see that Tao cultivators, despite doing very well in competition, do not need to be competitive. Or perhaps you can say it like, because Tao cultivators do extremely well in a competitive situation, that is why they don't need to be competitive. So just like the wild rhinos and tigers, the soldiers have no way to cause harm. So this is the third example of how Tao cultivators can be protected while traveling through the journey of life. So next line, let's talk about the next line here. Next line is the same as the previous line with the same question, why? It's the same 3 characters as before. But now, in the second half, the question is different. The question is asking about something different. This time, the question is, how can this person who is good at cultivating life, this 1 person out of 10, how can this person, this type of people, how can they be protected against all the dangers in life, all the potential negativity in life? How do they protect themselves? And the last line is simple, but also complex and very profound. I am very glad to be getting to the last line, line 15, because they have no place for death. This really summarizes everything, but it is not obvious what it is talking about. Let me explain. To have no place for death is a simple phrase, but it represents a complex answer from the Tao perspective on life and death. How do we know? How do I know that this is all about the Tao perspective of life and death? The last line is all about that. How can we be sure that's what it's talking about? Well, the answer is simple. We know because this chapter is the chapter of life and death. This is the life and death chapter. That's the importance of talking about the chapter title for chapter 50. So let's delve into it further, and I'll demonstrate how you arrive at the final answer and how everything is nicely tied together. So first of all, we can glimpse the Tao of life and death in the first line of this chapter. Remember, the first line of this chapter speaks of the great circle where you transition from the Tao to the material world to live out this life, and then upon death, transition back. That's the great circle. In the Tao perspective, all sentient beings, that's you and me, are spiritual beings that come into the physical world to live and then return to the Tao. So why do we come here to live? What is the purpose of coming here to the material world, the physical universe, to live out a lifetime before returning to the Tao? Well, we're all on a mission. The purpose for us coming into life is simple. We're here to learn. We're here to learn spiritual lessons. We're here to better ourselves. And we're here to help one another do the same. We're here to experience. We're here to have a little bit of fun. And we're here to take our spiritual progress with us back to our point of origin, the Tao. Now, when I say coming into manifestation from the Tao, from the non-physical, from the metaphysical to the physical world, I'm actually not talking about some sort of supernatural manifestation. Indeed, from the Tao perspective, the great cycle, the great circle of life and death is a natural transition, just like the changing of seasons. So great sages talk about this, and in a moment, I'm going to give you an example of that. For now, though, it's time for us to revisit that same graph that divides people up into 4 categories as a way of simplifying the discussion. So the 4 categories, I mentioned that the first 3 categories are the people who don't actually get it. They haven't understood completely what it is about the Tao of life and death that is so important. So in category number 1, the followers of life, I said that, no, this is actually not the Tao cultivators. This is actually the people who fall short of that. Followers of life who live, who have longevity, who have lives that are uneventful, well, a lot of times it's because of fear. Because of fear, they cling to safety, cling to life. Why? Why is it that they hold on for dear life? Literally hold on for dear life and therefore live long. Well, they don't understand the nature of life and death. They don't see the great circle. The fear is that, I only have so many years to this lifetime. I only have so many decades. And as far as I know, this is the only chance I got at existence. The Tao sages, as you will see, will point out, no, the transition from life to death and back again is like the transitioning of seasonal changes. The end of a season is not the end of all seasons. Hang on to that thought. I will come back to it. For now, let's talk about category number 2, followers of death. So why do people, quote unquote, follow death or become disciples of death? In the language of Lao Tzu, well, they take risks, they die young, it's tragic. Dying too soon, they are throwing so much away, the lives they have yet to live has been cut short, and that's it. This happens all the time when we see people dying too soon. Not having lived a full life with great potential completely wasted. And that's why it's tragic. How about the third category? Also a misunderstanding, also a lack of comprehension in the Tao. People whose lives are moved toward death due to excessive consumption, overindulgence, they are misguided. So this is not so much about fear. It's not so much tragic as it is misguided. People who go in full speed ahead with material consumption, overindulgence, these are the people who are misguided in the sense that they think life is about collecting sensory pleasures rather than spiritual enlightenment. So they direct a lot of effort at the wrong pursuit, the material rather than spiritual pursuit. So these are the misguided people. How about the last category? Those who are good at cultivating life. Well, this is the Tao. This is full understanding of the great circle of life and death, complete understanding. So if you look back again at the previous 3 categories, first we have people who don't understand that the end of a season is not the end of all seasons. In the second one, we have people who don't understand that life is an incredible gift. It's meant to be cherished and used properly. Because they don't understand that, they waste the opportunity. They leave loved ones grieving for the loss. And the third category, well, that's what happens when you don't understand the essence of life. That it's about the spiritual, it's not about the material. The fourth category is what happens when you understand all of the above. You see life clearly, you perceive the great circle, And that frees you from fear. You don't need to live an excessively safe life because you can travel and make progress safely, avoiding dangers by practicing the Tao. You treasure every moment of life, including this moment that you and I share. And you understand what you are here to do. You are living this life not to satisfy material pleasures. That can be a part of it. It's just not your primary mission. You understand that. Because of that, this liberation of fear, this clear perception, these all go hand in hand with your natural evolution toward cultivating the Tao. Finally, we are able to decrypt this line. They have no place for death. Now, I'm going to say it in a slightly different way about the previous three categories. Those who have not yet come to this realization, it means, number one, they're overly cautious. They don't understand that what an opportunity life is to explore, to experience new things, to learn new ideas, new truths, to open up your mind. They don't understand that life has wonderful opportunities that should be utilized. And that's why they're overly cautious. They don't want to do anything. That's the first one. And those who are reckless, they don't fully appreciate the value of life. They don't know that it's supposed to be cherished. They don't know that they have to make much, much more use of it, not just experiencing different risks or seeking thrills. And those who overindulge, they don't really understand the real purpose of life. The real purpose of life is not to gorge yourself at the buffet table. Rather, it is to gorge yourself, quote unquote, spiritually at the great lessons that life has to offer. So the 1% out of 10, and I hope all of us can count ourselves as aspiring to be the 1% out of 10. At least today, you have seen and heard describe this great circle of life and death. You have the realization that I hope will naturally lead to Tao cultivation, a journey, a path that is lasting, that endures the test of time. With this realization, Tao cultivators no longer fear death. This is the real meaning. When we say having no place for death, it just means that there's no place in your mind to accommodate the fear of death, because you see everything so incredibly clearly. So the best way to illustrate this idea, the essence of this lesson, is actually a story from Zhuangzi. And I am so happy to be able to end this year with this great story from the great sage. As you can see here, the name of the story is The Death of Zhuangzi's Wife. One of the great stories from Zhuangzi, let me share it with you. This story comes to us from the time when the wife of Zhuangzi has died. His friend, Huizi, also a scholar and a philosopher, was worried about Zhuangzi. You know, what's happening? Is he doing okay? What's happening with him? His wife just died. So Huizi wanted to visit Zhuangzi to express condolence. They're good friends. When Huizi arrived, he saw that Zhuangzi was sitting on the ground, drumming on a pot, singing a song, much as what you see here in this slide. This was puzzling to 惠子. He's thinking, my friend Zhuangzi does not seem to be grieving at all. And this seems inappropriate. So 惠子 went to Zhuangzi. He said, what are you doing? Your wife has passed away. She's been there for you all these years, right? She, along with you, have raised your children, built a family with you, built a life with you, right? Now she's gone. And I can see that evidently you feel no sadness. You're not shedding any tears. You're drumming and singing. Okay, well, this is a little bit too much, don't you think? Now, Zhuangzi, in responding to his friend Huizi, he knew that Huizi was very well-meaning. So he explained. He said, my friend, this is not what it looks like. He said, of course, I was struck with grief when my wife passed away. How could I not be? But then I came upon this realization. This realization was all about the life that I thought she lost. You see, the life that she lost, that I assumed was hers to lose, was not something she had in the first place. So this is not something that Huizi could follow. He's even more puzzled than before. So Zhuangzi explained. He said, well, during the time before her birth, she did not possess life. Obviously, she did not possess the physical form that you came to know as my wife. Of course, she did not possess anything at all associated with what you know as my wife. Of course, obviously. Well, she ended up in the exact same state. So there wasn't actually anything that she lost. She didn't have it before, she gained something, now she doesn't have them again. She didn't actually lose anything, she gained a life between the two states of not having anything. So this is all reasoning. This is all making a lot of sense, and Huizi had to admit that. Now he never thought about human life in quite that way, but he followed the reasoning thought process that Zhuangzi was explaining. So then Zhuangzi continued with that same train of thought. He said, think of her death as transformation. It's the transformation that is very similar to when she was born. Now, prior to all this, prior to being born, in the states between existence and non-existence, that initial transformation gave rise to energy. The energy gave rise to physical form. That physical form took on life to become a human being. My wife. Now it's the other way around. It's a continuation of the transformation that now returns her to the Tao from when she came in the first place. This whole process, non-existence to life, life back to non-existence again, is just like the changing of seasons. It's all completely in accordance with nature. So somehow, to Huizi, the behavior from Zhuangzi, the drumming, the singing that he thought was so inappropriate when he came in, no longer seemed as inappropriate as before. In understanding, he said, I see. Since the transformation is perfectly in accordance with nature, it's not really something that we need to be sad about. Just like you and I will not cry over autumn changing into winter, or indeed any season into the season that comes after. So Zhuangzi nodded. Zhuangzi said, yes, she is now resting peacefully in the hereafter. Now she doesn't have all the constraints and limitations of life. The more I think about that, the more silly it seems for me to cry my eyes out. I will always miss her, but it is not necessary for me to grieve for her as if her death was a great tragedy. The end. You can tell Zhuangzi definitely had a different way to think about life. And what he expressed in story form is indeed everything that we have talked about just now, about the realization of the Tao of life and death. Let's break it down. Let's talk about the Tao of death before we return once again to the Tao of life and death. First of all, everything that Zhuangzi said applied equally well to all loved ones, not just the spouse. It applies to all loved ones, all friends who pass away, family members. It also applies to your own mortality and mine. One's own mortality, we're all going to go at some point. And that's why it's important to be thinking about this. And then another point, just like Huizi, just like Zhuangzi, before he had his realization, we have this tendency to think, well, this is my life. This life belongs to me. My lifetime is mine and mine alone. We think it belongs to us. Does it really? If it is yours, it is certainly not yours indefinitely. It is yours temporarily. Your life, this material existence you are living now, you think of it as yours, but I say is yours only temporarily, like something you borrow. Something you borrow, and you're going to have to return at some point. Like a book that you checked out of a library. At some point, you have to return that book so someone else can check it out. You're free to check out the same book again later on. Of course, there is no same book because that book will have been used. It will be a book in different part of the space-time continuum. It's not the same river that you step back in a second time. So you can check out a book, quote unquote, and it may read like the book that you read before, but it's not the same copy. It's like a car that you rent in order to go from one place to another. When you're done with your trip, when your road trip driving that rental car, it's time to return the rental car. While you are driving, you may temporarily think that this is my car. Well, it's the car that you are driving in that moment, I admit. But eventually you have to return the car to the rental car agency. So when you think about it that way, that it's not something that you own, but something that you're checking out, borrowing temporarily, then it's clear that coming into life is an opportunity. Opportunity that we have to make as much use out of it as we possibly can, because we have to return at some point to complete the great circle. And this great circle is about transitioning. No different from all other transitions that occur in nature. This is where I reemphasize my previous point about how the end of a season is not the end of all seasons. It's no accident. The story that I told you was a faithful translation of the original story told by Zhuangzi. It's no accident that he decided to use the changing of seasons in a very deliberate way. It's a deliberate choice. what is said is that, well, you may be sad for a moment that summer is coming to an end, spring or summer is coming to an end, but it's not the last spring or the last summer. In time, spring or summer will come again. Hence the great circle. The process continues on. The Tao continues on. And therefore, I say once again to everyone who's gathering together in this meeting, right now, right here and now, what we're all experiencing together, this is only a small part in an infinite journey. Your journey, my journey. This is just a small part of it. And I hope this is the part when a light comes on. And you say, yes, that's exactly how reality works. This is life. Everything that I have talked about from Zhuangzi today comes from the Tao of Happiness. It's all about the Tao of life and death. In the Tao of Happiness, what I have done here is that I have included the last part from the table of contents to share with everyone. The whole book is described as the life journey. In a journey, in any journey, there is always the beginning of the journey. The journey is the overarching metaphor for the entire book, and the beginning is the departure. This can be the beginning of your life, your birth, or the beginning of your realization, epiphany about the life journey itself. Maybe the beginning of that is today. Maybe it's right now. Because in a sense, you are awakening to life. While you are on the trip, while you are engaged in this great journey, this sacred quest, there's travel advisory. That's another section from the book. And that's about all the things to watch out for, the warning signs. And then there are travel tips. And that's tips on maximizing your experience in this life. Now, every trip comes to an end. That's the arrival. If departure is your birth, then arrival is the end of your life, which is why you see part 4, arrival, and there are 5 chapters on death, each one presenting a different teaching from the Tao of life and death. What you have just heard, the death of Zhuangzi's wife, well, there's definitely lessons to be learned from that about the natural transitions and why should we let ourselves be overwhelmed with grief. If we understand how life actually works, then we can come to terms with it. We can function without being overwhelmed by grief. The second one there, what follows? The death of Zhuangzi's friend. Well, it's all about what we do for one another, our soul companions in this lifetime. And then there's more. There's so many different aspects to this Tao of life and death. The death of Zhuangzi himself. It's all about detachment, all about letting go of attachments, because we're never going to be able to take anything with us when we die. We can take the progress that we have made in this lifetime. And then there's more. Tears of Fears, that's about fear of the unknown. That's very much about death. Death is the great unknown. And how would you and I change our thinking if we had a better understanding? The last one there, The Dream of the Butterfly, that's the signature story from the entire canon of Zhuangzi's stories. It's the representation of Zhuangzi as a sage. The butterfly, the transformation of existence. So life Zhuangzi says, is like a dream. And here again, he's being very deliberate in his choice of metaphors. The end of one dream is not the end of all dreams. This goes a little deeper than row, row, row your boat. Life is but a dream. It's talking about the reiterative theme of detachment. When you realize the similarities between life and a dream, you wouldn't be so caught up in the rage of the moment. So many lessons about that in the last part in the Tao of Happiness. And I remember when I was interviewed by Huffington Post about this book, The Tao of Happiness, the question was asked, hey, Derek, in this book about happiness, why do you have so many chapters devoted to death? And I answered honestly, in the great tradition of the Tao. The answer is simple. Even though I know it's counterintuitive to a lot of people to talk about death so much in a book about happiness, the reality is that it is only when we fully understand death and accept it with the clarity of the Tao, it's only then that we can start to live life to the fullest. It's how we fully embrace life. It's important. And I know it's not easy, but the happiness that you attain when you realize, when you understand the Tao of life and death, it's lasting. It takes effort to do this work. It can be difficult at times. But the happiness is the true happiness when you master this Tao, true happiness in the sense that it endures the test of time. You begin to see your purpose in life. You begin to walk your path with intent. That's powerful. It's the happiness that is always present. You radiate this authentic inner joy when you have mastery. It doesn't matter what happens. It never goes away. You are liberated from fear. So that, my friends, is the end of my explanation on the line-by-line commentary of Tao Te Ching, chapter 50. We have yet to do the paraphrase and the full circle, which will reinforce the points that I have talked about today. I am going to leave them for the beginning of 2021. It's rather fitting because the end is also the beginning in the Tao perspective. So I'll leave it to that time. Next time, in 1, 2, 3 weeks, we will do the paraphrase and the full circle. But now, though, I don't want to lose the insights that we have gained. I want to show everyone again the summary for this entire chapter. As you have seen, this chapter was divided into 2 halves, the top half and the bottom half. And therefore, the summary is also divided into 2 parts. Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1, you saw last time. The summary for last time was about the followers of life, followers of death, those whose lives are moved toward death, and those who are good at cultivating life. So now, remember, you don't want to be in the first 3 categories, even though the first one, the followers of that life, it may sound tempting, like that's the correct choice. No, you want the last category there. You want to be the 1% out of 10 who's good at cultivating life, and therefore you are able to make progress through your existence with total safety, total joy, total happiness. That's amplified in part 2, that when you master the Tao of life and death, you travel through life safe from attackers, from malicious people, events, negativity, so many potential sources of danger out there. That's number 1. Number 2, criticisms have no power against you because you are consistent in your words and actions. That's just one example out of the several that we have talked about. The other one is vicious rumors do not affect you because of the way you live. You live consistently, impeccably, so people know you. They dismiss malicious gossip. It's never taken seriously because you are the person that you are. Number 4, and the final point, you're protected from personal attacks. Yet another example provided by Lao Tzu, because your integrity is an armor shielding you from such weapons. So this together, these 4 points summarize the last half of chapter 50. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.